Power doesn't disappear overnight. It leaks quietly, vote by vote. For years, Washington believed one thing: when Donald Trump commands, Republicans comply. No hesitation, no rebellion. That story just cracked. In one single day, a Republican-led Congress handed Trump 2 defeats. Not symbolic, not accidental, and not driven by Democrats alone. These were procedural votes, cold, calculated, the kind politicians take when fear begins to change direction. No shouting, no drama, just numbers lighting up a board and loyalty quietly stepping aside. This is how real power erodes. Not with noise, with math. If you want to understand why this moment matters more than it looks and what it reveals about Trump's hold on his own party, stay with me. Because before we talk about consequences, we have to understand the problem itself. And it starts with a dangerous illusion Washington has been telling itself. The illusion is simple: Trump controls Congress. Completely, unquestionably. But that belief confuses noise with power. And loyalty with leverage. What we saw was not a revolt. It was something more revealing. Republicans choosing institutions over instinct, careers over commands. In the House, a bipartisan majority revived healthcare subsidies, Republicans themselves allowed to expire. 17 Republicans crossed the line, not to oppose Trump loudly, but to fix a problem voters would notice. In the Senate, the message was sharper: a war powers resolution, a direct warning against unauthorized military action in Venezuela. 5 Republican senators voted to advance it, despite the White House's objections. These lawmakers did not suddenly become Trump's enemies. They became realists. They read polls. They feel pressure. They see an election coming, and when survival enters the equation, power dynamics change. To understand why this matters, we have to go back to how the system was built and why it's now pushing back. Power in Washington has always moved in cycles. Strong presidents rise, Congress yields, then the system pushes back. The Constitution was designed this way: ambition countering ambition, institutions restraining individuals. Donald Trump's return to power revived an old pattern: a dominant president, a compliant party, a Congress that at first followed, but control built on fear is fragile, especially when elections approach. As the months passed, small signals appeared: rejected nominees, trade rebukes, procedural resistance. Not ideology, not rebellion, self-preservation. Members of Congress live on a shorter clock than presidents. Every 2 years in the House, 6 years in the Senate. Votes are memories. Policies have consequences. When benefits expire, when wars expand without authorization, lawmakers don't hear theory. They hear voters. That is the deeper mechanism at work. Institutions don't revolt. They recalibrate. And once recalibration begins, it rarely stops at one vote, because the system is now doing what it was built to do. Slowly, reluctantly, but unmistakably. And then something snapped. A first visible crisis. The first crack came quietly. In the House, through a procedure most Americans never hear about. A discharge petition. Rare. Technical. Powerful. Democrats used it to revive and extend Affordable Care Act insurance subsidies. Benefits Republicans had allowed to expire on January 1. Benefits voters feel immediately. Then came the number: 17. 17 House Republicans broke ranks. Not enough to make headlines at first glance. Enough to change everything. Because this vote was not about ideology. It was about consequences. Health insurance is not abstract. It shows up in monthly bills, doctor visits, emergency rooms. Republicans didn't cross over to oppose Trump. They crossed over to protect themselves. That is the key detail many missed. This was bipartisan concern overriding partisan fear, a signal that loyalty has limits when policy hits home. If you're finding this perspective useful, take a moment to stay with the conversation. These procedural moments matter more than speeches ever will. And this was only the beginning, because hours later, the Senate delivered a sharper, more public warning, one that struck at presidential power itself. What ties these moments together is not rebellion. It is mechanism. Congress was not acting emotionally. It was acting structurally. The House vote wasn't about healthcare ideology, and the Senate vote wasn't about foreign policy morality. They were about authority and limits. In the Senate, a war powers resolution advanced, not to end a war, but to reassert Congress's role. 5 Republican senators crossed over. They knew the resolution might go nowhere. They knew the president could veto it. That's what made it meaningful. Symbolic votes are often dismissed, but symbols shape behavior. They redraw boundaries. This vote said something simple. Presidential power is not automatic. It must be justified. Again and again, Trump understood that, which is why his reaction was immediate and furious. He didn't argue policy. He attacked legitimacy. He demanded punishment. That response revealed the truth. The real fear was not this vote. It was the precedent, because once Congress remembers it can say no, the system starts to change. And soon, the pressure would intensify. Not in theory, but in real lives. Now, shift your perspective from Capitol Hill to where you live, because this is where power becomes personal. If you're a voter, these votes are not abstract. They shape your costs, your security, your future. When healthcare subsidies expire, you feel it. Higher premiums, delayed treatment, hard choices. When military actions expand without authorization, you feel that too. In instability, in risk, in a country stretched thinner, you may not follow discharge petitions or war powers resolutions, but you live with their consequences. And lawmakers know this. That's why some Republicans broke ranks, not out of courage, out of calculation. They are responding to pressure from people like you, from districts that are tired of chaos, from voters who want limits. This is the quiet power citizens still hold, not through protests, through consequences. If this analysis helps you see politics more clearly, stay with me. Understanding power is the first step to reclaiming it, because what happens next doesn't stop at America's borders. It never does. When the United States hesitates, the world notices. When Congress pushes back, allies reassess. Adversaries adjust. This moment is not just domestic. It is geopolitical. A Congress willing to challenge presidential authority sends a mixed signal abroad. On one hand, restraint. On the other, uncertainty. In Venezuela, every vote in Washington is read carefully. So are divisions inside the American system. They shape calculations. They invite testing. Allies, too, are watching. They ask a quiet question. Who speaks for America right now? A president under pressure, a Congress reasserting itself, an election looming. That combination creates hesitation. And hesitation changes behavior. Markets react. Diplomats recalibrate. Governments delay commitments. This is how internal political dynamics ripple outward. Not dramatically, incrementally. The world does not need chaos to feel instability. It only needs ambiguity. And ambiguity is exactly what this moment produces. Which brings us to the hardest question of all. What happens next? Because from here, the system can move in more than one direction. And none of them are guaranteed. From here, the future splits, not into certainty, into scenarios. The first path is stabilization. Republicans continue to defect selectively, not to oppose Trump, but to protect themselves. Congress reasserts limits quietly. Votes accumulate, power rebalances without collapse. Trump remains influential, but constrained, forced to negotiate, forced to justify. The second path is stagnation. More symbolic rebukes, few real consequences. Congress signals discomfort. The White House ignores it. Gridlock hardens. Nothing breaks. Nothing heals. The system drifts. Then there is the third path, escalation. Trump tightens control, punishes dissent, demands loyalty tests, defections become confrontations, institutions collide, elections turn into referendums on authority itself. History tells us something important here. Systems rarely snap suddenly. They strain, they creak, they warn. What we are seeing now is a warning phase. Which path America takes depends on one variable. Not Trump, not Congress, but whether enough people recognize what this moment really is. And that brings us to the final insight. The part most discussions miss. Here is the truth beneath the noise. Power is not proven by obedience. It is proven by resistance. For years, Donald Trump thrived in a system that confused volume with control. But institutions do not respond to volume forever. They respond to incentives. What happened this week was not a collapse. It was a signal. A Republican Congress did not overthrow a president. It reminded him and itself that power in America is conditional. Votes matter. Procedures matter. So do the moments when lawmakers choose survival over submission. As elections approach, those moments will multiply. Not because Trump is weak, but because politics is changing around him. If you want to understand where the story goes next, don't watch the speeches. Watch the votes. And if this helped you see power more clearly, stay connected. Share the conversation. Because the next chapter will not begin with a headline. It will begin with another quiet number on a board.